nobody other than Chance Ravinne, aka WINGSPAN TT, the man that delivers torpedoes to your home, even if you have not requested them, with style. You have director authorization to make it loud if you want. Welcome, Chance Ravinne.
A very warm welcome, very warm welcome. I like it.
Welcome.
Hey.
Hey.
Now we're just
You sound like you're from Eve Uni, guys.
Yeah, come on, guys.
Torpedoes.
You
Give me
can have
torpedoes.
Okay, we can arrange it. So, yeah, I guess I'm here because I am famous for being bad at flying stealth bombers. So I'm very glad to be talking to you guys today. I know that you have a background in cloaking and things like that, and I'm sure many of you are more experienced, but this is geared towards beginners because it's, Eve University, and I want to have like more 101 level class to catch everyone up. I'm not going to make a huge deal out of plugging my book, but I also have a book, so if you really want to go through all that detail, that exists. But otherwise, let's make the most of this presentation. Can everyone see the first slide okay?
Yep. Mm-hmm. All good.
Yep.
Now I know on some monitors that line looks like a 28-degree angle, and some it looks like a 29, but I assure you it's a 28-degree angle. So let's begin. So stealth bombers, introduction to the worst ship you'll ever love. I obviously love flying stealth bombers,
Atticus
but
Holmes entered channel.
Calling it the worst ship, in part because it's not something that's easy to use. It's definitely not something that is a reliable killing machine by any means, but it's something that has a very specific niche in Eve, which is something that if you are interested in getting into, it's very fun, very rewarding, and it's just completely unique. So what is a stealth bomber anyway? Here, of course, we have the B-2 bomber, which is historically, in the United States a bomber, but like the real-world inspiration, stealth bombers are highly specialized covert ops strike craft. What that means in the general sense is that this, like I said before, it's not a one-size-fits-all ship. This is something you're going to be using for specific purposes against specific targets, and of course covert ops, because like in real life, stealth bomber, due to its shape and the coding and all that stuff, it deflects radar, it's not easily detected.
Mentally
Being a
unfit
covert
started
ops ship,
recording.
stealth bombers,
Mentally
of course,
unfit stopped recording.
of course, similar in that regard. Now, of course, there's some things to keep in mind that are annoying to skill into, so even though the basic requirements are pretty simple, to actually get your skills up to fly them to a more competent level is not the easiest thing. Difficult to operate correctly. They are the slowest, most cumbersome frigates. So even though they're frigates, your base align time, you're looking at 8 to 9 seconds for some of them, if you have really low skills. So this is not like a GTFO, fast little ship you can get out of. They're just like a real stealth bomber. Again, they're not like zippy little jets that are just going to be going away. So once you commit, you better have a plan to get out alive or be aligned, or hope for the best. Hope you do enough damage to survive. They're impossible to keep alive, and they're blast to fly. And it has some. You notice even the picture I found on Wikipedia here has the word wingspan on it, which of course made me very happy. It's perfect for capsulators who enjoy stealth gameplay, non-consensual PvP, cloaky camping, tier harvesting, solo operations, and fleet operations. And I've also listed here the minimum skills trained for stealth bombers. But of course, if you want to do better stealth bombers, I highly recommend getting your missile support skills up, your torpedo skills up, your covert ops skills up, and your various electronic warfare and navigation skills. You also need good CPU fitting skills, because most of the modules you'll be fitting on stealth bomber are very, very CPU intensive, and that's usually the bottleneck where people see when they're trying to fit these craft.
Hashina entered channel.
Okay, so stealth bombers have cachet for a reason. Well, there's actually 4 reasons. Stealth bombers are unique, and I use unique not in the term to mean special, but actually unique in Eve, that there's only certain things that only stealth bombers can do. So the first thing, behind enemy lines,
Mentally unfit
is having a covert ops cloak. And the covert ops cloak, while not unique, okay, but it's a relatively niche thing, is very important to stealth bombers because it means that you can get into position, that you can choose when you engage all your targets and who your targets are. So that means you can watch people for a long time, you can get in the exact range of your EWAR, your bombs, your torpedoes, whatever you need to do, and just choose whether or not you want to fight. If you're going to be targeting someone and their friends show up, you land on grid, there's a bunch of recons that didn't show up on D-scan, you don't have to engage with them. It's totally your call. So while the covert while stealth bombers have a very poor tank and they don't live through a lot of things, you have the huge advantage of you decide when to fight. So usually when you die it's because you fucked up or you got hugely surprised by something, but this is the first advantage. Next, this is actually unique, sensor recalibration, a lack of sensor recalibration. So pretty much every ship in the game, as you know from your previous cloaking, has a sensor recalibration time with a cloak, which means that after you decloak, there's a certain number of seconds where you cannot target anything. But stealth bombers do not have that handicap in any way whatsoever. So the server tick that you uncloak, you can begin targeting immediately, and then of course once you're locked from there, you can cloak things up. So what that means is, in general, with the covert ops cloak, you can get in perfect position, and depending on how much attention your target is paying attention or anything like that, you will always get the drop on them, at least in the sense of exactly when you uncloak and exactly when you target them. Now, of course, if you're in K-space, if you're in, high sec, low sec, null sec, they'll see you in local, or someone saw you on D-scan before you cloak. There's always that. But just in general, you have this huge advantage where you don't have that, 4 to 10 kind of second window where you cannot target things, which is huge, absolutely huge. And this applies to all weapons you have in your high slot. It does not apply only to torpedoes or anything like that. So if you are rocket fit, if you have a gun equipped for whatever reason, then that also applies. Nuke it from orbit. This is, of course, the bomb part of stealth bombers. So we just talked about the stealth part, but the fact that stealth bombers can launch bombs from the bomb launcher. Bombs are completely unique to stealth bombers. They cannot be equipped to other ships. So only stealth bombers can launch bombs, and we'll be talking more about that later. But it's important to know if you want to drop bombs, you're going to have to get either really good at rhyming or you're going to have to fly a stealth bomber. And torpedoes away. Of course, there are several ships in the game that can fire torpedoes, but they're like battlecruiser, battleship level ships. So in other words, this is a frigate that can fire battleship level weaponry, which is obviously very good in terms of applying damage to large ships and large targets. That will have, of course, problems against smaller targets. We'll get into that later, but again, this is unique. There's not other frigates that you're going to be, firing large size weapons from. I guess you can get like a single heavy drone on the smaller drone boats, but I don't count that. Of course, there are downsides, believe it or not, to flying stealth bombers. First, paper planes. Like I said before, stealth bombers have extremely poor tank. Basically, if anything decides to engage you that is, a frigate, a cruise, a destroyer, someone who's just ready for you, once you start taking damage to stealth bomber, you're going to be going down really fast. And while there are fits that can mitigate that to some extent, if you're trying to tank fit your bomber, it's not going to happen. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Little packages. This is what I was saying before about torpedoes and bombs. These weapons are designed to be used against large ships and structures and things like that. So, you're not going to be doing well against small targets at any point whatsoever. As I was mentioning before, with the fitting skills, the missile skills, the skills to actually train up into a bomber, the EWAR skills, propulsion jamming, all that stuff, even though the base requirements are not that insane to actually be able to fly a stealth bomber with a certain level of competency, to actually be able to do damage, or to even just to basically fit your ship, you won't be able to jump into this if you just barely beat the minimum requirements. You will have to actually skill up past that. And the wait for it, like I said before, one of the advantages of stealth bombers is that you can choose your targets. You have the option of covert ops cloak. You have the sensor recalibration, so you can choose when to engage. But because your engagement profile is relatively narrow, you will be waiting around a lot of the time. So if you're in solo or in small gang or anything like that, most of the ships that come through, like if you're camping a gate or you're waiting somewhere for people, a lot of the ships that come through you will not be able to engage. Obviously, that always depends on fleet composition. What that also just generally means, though, even in larger fleets, if you're going to do black ops, which is great, you will of course be waiting around for your hunter killer to go find something to drop on. So, that can depend obviously on what's going on at the time. But stealth bomber is not the kind of thing where you just fly between faction warfare, systems and just find fights. That's not how it works. So if that's what you're looking for, this is not the ship for you, just to get that out there. Are there any questions so far? Take that as a no. Okay, so let's talk about bombs real quick. Setting up your enemy the bomb. So, like I said before, it's something only stealth bombers can do, is carry and launch bombs. There's certain unique properties you should know about bombs if you don't already know, and we're going to go through a couple of those. So first is that bomb launchers are equipped to high power slot. That have relatively steep fitting requirements and increase your ship's signature radius. And I missed an apostrophe there, so I will cut myself later to make amends for that, but I just want you guys to know. So basically, it is always harder to fit a bomb launcher onto a stealth bomber. They don't have some kind of bonus for fitting the bomb launcher. It will take up a lot of your CPU. It will make your ship's signature radius larger, so you'll be targeted faster. Just things to keep in mind. And you do not always need a bomb fit for reasons we'll talk about in a little bit. The bomb deployment skill, which is required for bomb launchers, reduces the time between when you can launch bombs, and it also makes various bomb types available to you. So as you train up bomb deployment, you'll unlock the different bomb types. You can launch bombs more frequently. When you get to level 5 bomb deployment, you can have a T2 launcher. Let's talk about the different bomb types real quickly. There are the different damage bombs, which are the 4 different damage types in EVE. You got thermal, I don't need to explain that. There's void bombs, which are attack the enemy's capacitor. They're essentially cap neutralization. There's the normal void bomb and the relatively new focused void bomb that does much more cap neutralization, but in a very small area. It's meant for hitting larger ships. And lock breaker bombs, which when fired and explode will, well, what do you guess, break the locks of all the ships they hit. They will not allow you to open, unfortunately, the door in your captain's quarters. That lock can never be broken. Then we have the covert ops skill. This is very important. Is the only skill in the game that's going to be increasing your bomb damage, single bomb damage. So the more you level this up, the more damage your bombs will do, but only for the bombs that are racially tied to your ship's hull. So if you're flying a Nemesis, you'll only get bonuses to thermal bombs. And finally here, bombs can only be launched in nullsec and wormhole space. So you cannot even launch a bomb in high sec or low sec, let alone hit things. That's why you don't see people doing suicide bomb launches on G to undock or anything like that, because you can't do it. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to use a bomb, you need to be in these areas. And what that also means is that this is part of the reason why you shouldn't always be bomb fit, because if you're operating in low sec or you're hitting war targets or things like that in high sec, there's no reason to have a bomb launcher fit. You might as well have a probe launcher fit, or yes, you could have a turret fit or something like that. There's lots of other wonky builds you could do, but that's basically the gist of it. Okay, let's learn a little bit about the actual bombs themselves. So one thing is that a lot of people don't realize is that bombs can actually be killed. They are a collider. They're going to go out into space. They do have hit points. Most frequently, though, if bombs are being killed, they're being killed by a firewall of smart bombs, which means that battleships or other ships are firing smart bombs timed to try to destroy the bombs as they come in, because bombs don't actually have a lot of hit points. But the thing that the bombs do have is a very, very large resistance to the actual type of damage they do. So if you have an explosive bomb, it has a very high explosive resistance. What that means is that that's so that explosive bombs don't destroy each other. That allows you to fire waves of bombs. You can fire, you can fire a bunch of bombs at once of the same type. They won't blow each other up, but if you fire, a couple of bombs of different types, as soon as the first one detonates, its damage will destroy the other bombs, kind of wasting them. So that's why it's important to understand that when you're fitting up a group of other bombers, or if you're trying to defend against bombs that are incoming. You could technically destroy bombs with other weapons. It's just typically not, that's not something that happens because bombs have a very small signature radius. They only exist for 12 seconds in space, so you need to be aware of bombs coming your way and lock this extremely tiny thing and hit it and kill it with your weapons in 12 seconds, which is something that is definitely possible, but usually only possible when you're ready for it. If your bomb is destroyed, it doesn't explode, so there is no bonus. Like, you see someone about to launch a bomb, you get ready, as soon as they fire it, you snipe their bomb and it blows up in their face. It doesn't work like that. It's not like some Hollywood action movie where you shoot the grenade out of someone's hand or something like that. I'm pretty sure there's been some first-person shooters where that happened, but unfortunately it doesn't happen in Eve. The bomb being destroyed has no effect. If your ship is destroyed, there's different scenarios where the bomb has no effect, but basically you need to actually fire the bomb, and the bomb needs to like fly all the way to the person and blow up. That's what's the important thing to keep in mind. Bombs apply damage based on signature radius. So what this means is that just like missiles, the smaller your ship is, okay? Like, the smaller the ship is, the less damage your bomb will do. So your bomb may say it does 8,000 damage, but that's to something that has a large signature radius, you know, and as that scales down, a bomb will do significantly less damage to a frigate compared to a cruiser, compared to a battle cruiser, battleship, etc. Now, that's not saying that a bomb won't absolutely wreck some untanked little frigate. It's just trying to keep in mind that you're aiming to hit large things, or you're going to need more bombs if you want to do more damage to smaller targets. That said, bombs, unlike missiles, do not have explosion velocity, so moving around does not reduce the damage whatsoever. Bombs are untargeted weapons, just like smart bombs are completely untargeted, so while the sensor recalibration thing is a great thing for your torpedoes and other missile platforms, it doesn't actually affect bombs whatsoever. You do not need to target anything. You just need to fire the bomb in the general deathly direction of the things that you want to die. You do not have to lock them at any point whatsoever. Just fire it and forget it, set it and forget it. When the bomb blows up, it does AOE damage or its effects, so the void bombs or lockbreaker bombs, on everything within the blast radius. Absolutely everything. So what that means is that includes your allies, that includes NPCs, it includes your ship. If you were brave enough to light your micro warp drive and fly directly into the bomb's path, you will be taking the damage of the bomb as well. And if your micro warp drive is still on, guess what? Your signature bloom from it will be increasing the whole explosion radius effect on you, drastically increasing the chance that you will die. So let's just look at a very, very simple bombing scenario here. We have our two bombers who are here setting up on their target. And even though these bombers are two different bombers, we have the Manticore and the Hound. They should be working together to fire the same type of bomb because, like I said before, they'll neutralize each other's bombs otherwise. So step one is, the thing to keep in mind is that bombs go 30 kilometers. So regardless of your ship speed or anything like that, they always fly 30 kilometers. You want to be about 30 kilometers out. It doesn't have to be exact because obviously it's AoE, but you should know that the center of where your bomb is going to explode is 30 kilometers out. And you want to align because your bombs, unlike pretty much every weapon in the game, in EVE, are just going to travel in a straight line. So wherever you are aligned when you launch your bomb, that is the exact straight line path that your bomb is going to go. And it doesn't depend on your speed or anything like that, but you need to be 100% aligned because if you're in the process of aligning and you fire your bomb's going to fly off on some crazy tangent in the middle of nowhere. So usually what that means is if you get 35 kilometers out, 30, something, you get the distance out, and give yourself a little room to align to your target. And again, it's AoE, but it's very important to be aligned. Then, of course, you need to uncloak. You can't fire your bomb while you are cloaked. And you're going to launch the bomb. Launching the bomb is very simple. You're just going to fire it from the module. That's it. It's going to immediately go into its cooldown of the time that you can't fire the bomb for the next minute or two, depending on your skills and bomb launcher. And your bomb's going to start flying. And here we see our bombs, assuming our pilots were correctly aligned, their bombs are going to be landing in the general vicinity of our poor hapless Amar target here. And I didn't have a Galentia representative, but you can assume that there's a Cloaky Proteus somewhere on field. The bombs are going to travel along that straight line for 30 kilometers over 12 seconds. And then depending on what you're doing, it's up to you. If there's a lone, it's up to your fleet commander really. But generally, what you'd like to be doing is being aligned to a celestial or bookmark that's behind your target. So at that point, if your only goal is to fire these bombs and live, you'll be firing the bombs and then you'll be warping away. You'll be warping to something that's behind your target. Obviously, the longer you're on field, the more chance someone's going to lock you and insta-pop you because your tank is so poor, or prevent you from cloaking or whatever you want to do. So you have that option to warp out to a celestial or something like that that's behind your target. You also have the option to stay on field and apply torpedo damage or any other damage from your weapon systems, from your primary high slot weapon systems. That again, 100% depend on the situation and how many ships are on field. But warp or torp, that's what you want to decide at that point. So like I just said, 30 kilometers, 12-second flight time. 12 seconds gives the person some time to possibly snipe your bombs, to fire their, their smart bombs, to, turn on some hardeners, to pray to Bob, whatever they want to do during that 12 seconds. Totally fine. 15-kilometer blast radius is very important because what that means is that it's not. There's going to be 15. Like let's say you fire your bomb exactly 30 kilometers from your target. That means that the explosion is really going to be from 15 kilometers in front of you out to 45 kilometers in front of you because it's at 15 kilometers from the center. So it's that large and spherical, of course. It's that large effect, there. So it's very important that friendlies are outside that area, but also understanding, of course, in some circumstances, if you want to hit more than one target, you won't be hitting the exact center of one person. You'll be aiming in between them, or you'll be, shooting where they're anchored or something like that in order to hit multiple targets. And some quick things, like I said before, bomb types, you got to keep them the same so they don't annihilate each other. Ship speed doesn't matter. All that matters is that you're aligned. Do not fucking micro warp drive into the explosion unless you want to have a hilarious self-inflicted kill mail. And that's really it. It's relatively simple, but of course practice makes perfect because it's very easy to not be aligned or to fire at the wrong time, to fire too many bombs or the wrong type of bombs or anything like that. Are there any questions about this general mechanic here?
We had two questions in lecture.c-uni. One is, do you need to be on grid for your bomb to do damage?
No, you do not need to be on grid for the bomb to do damage. So
and
that's why
if you die... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why, it's very typical to launch the bombs and then to warp off because staying on grid for, 12 seconds is basically asking to die.
And the second question is, if you die, does your bomb still do damage?
I believe that it does not do damage. If I'm wrong, someone please correct me, but it is my understanding that it does not do damage.
Another one. When you're warping past, can you get hit in your warp with your own bomb?
Oh, that's... I'm going to say... I don't believe so. I would be extremely surprised if it's true. I've never seen it happen. I believe that you would be... I don't know if you're actually technically invincible, but just typically also the way that the warp alignment works and stuff like that, it just feels like you would have to try really hard to even make that happen. But I've never seen it happen. I don't think it's possible.
Another one, do you need to be on grid for your torpedoes to do damage?
Okay, so do you need to be on grid? So that's the thing. Yes, yes, and the reason is really shitty. So basically, the way all missiles work in EVE, for some reason, which I don't know the exact reasoning, or if there's, it may have been a balance issue from many years of patches ago, is that if you fire any missile and then while it's en route, you initiate warp. Even before you're technically in warp, once you've been told warp drive active, or you see your ship start aligning and all that stuff, your missiles will no longer inflict damage. So it's actually worse than not being on grid. Your torpedoes don't do damage. Literally, the second you have activated warp, all of your in-flight torpedoes will be completely sterile. They cannot do any damage. They cannot impregnate anyone. They're just going to land and just slap their face against a hull and do absolutely nothing.
Another one, is it possible for two different bombs types to explode at the same server tick without destroying one each other?
That's a really good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm going to assume the answer is yes, because for the purposes of server ticks, I believe those things would be considered to be simultaneous. But of course, you would need to have perfect timing for that, or be a very dirty multi-boxer who's very bad at choosing bomb types. Alright, let's move on to the next slide. And some of this will actually cover the realm of what we're just talking about. So here, of course, torpedoes. Torpedoes are the natural default high slot weapon of a stealth bomber in addition to bombs. Some people will rocket fit bombers, there's all kinds of different fits, but the default bonus for covert ops is 15% damage a level to racial torpedoes, which if you think about it, 75% damage for covert ops 5 is absolutely insane as far as bonuses go. Like, one level of covert ops training is the equivalent of like getting, you know, several other missile skills trained up a level. So even though the multiplier is very high, I highly recommend training in this area. And for reasons I'll explain later, I definitely recommend 90% of the time having torpedoes in your high slots. Let's see here. So just a couple of facts about torpedoes. Typically what's great about them is they do a lot of large volley damage. So depending on your skills and implants and blah blah blah, your exact fit, you're looking to do 3,000, 5,000 volley damage. This is enough damage to kill, you know, Iterons and haulers, like little small haulers like that in one shot. Even against, you know, targets that torpedoes are not normally good against, like little exploration frigates, because they're so small. If they're standing relatively still and you have them target painted or things like that, this is still enough damage to one-shot them. You can one-shot pods that are painted. Again, this all depends on your exact skill and fit and things like that, but you could do a lot of volley damage. Obviously, the rate of fire is relatively slow, but bam, you have that. Combined with the lack of sensor calibration and the sneakiness of the covert ops, you have extremely large, like, hello, hi, I'm here to bring you torpedoes, bam, right into the face. The range is relatively high. Again, this is a very high range for like a very small ship. This is because it's, you know, this is a battleship class weapon, so you can hit out pretty far. I'm sure you can hit out farther than 100 kilometers if you have the rigs and the implants and things like that, but it's just an example. Here, of course, the DPS, this is of course on paper DPS, can be anything from 300 with relatively low skills to 1,500 or possibly higher. I'm sure if you have polarized launchers or some kind of, you know, STML modified launchers, you have insane implants, you have, you know, if you had links and fleet bonuses and all this stuff, you could probably go even past 1,500 DPS. Of course, once again, as a caveat, that's two larger size targets, but if you're hitting structures, you're hitting battleships, you're hitting anything like that, you can get insane DPS out of these ships. And another thing to keep in mind is that you'll have a velocity bonus, so your torpedoes land much faster than they would on a non-bonused battleship or something like that if they were firing them. Now, oh, that's weird, my slide's not loading. Oh, how do I go back? Okay, so the bottom two things are just what I was saying before about the battleship size. So you have a 450 meter explosion radius. So again, I'm not going to rehash every missile thing, but what that means is your torpedoes will do maximum damage only to things with 450 signature radius or larger. So things that are smaller than that, you're going to do reduced damage. Everything 450 or higher, you're going to do your full damage for the most part. Now, of course, that's combined with explosion velocity, so things that are going slower than 71 meters per second, you're going to be doing full damage to. Things that are going faster than 71 meters per second, which is, of course, most active ships, you'll be doing reduced damage, which is why torpedoes are very good against targets that are not moving. So, like, if you're going to hit a miner or an explorer or something, and they're just sitting there scanning or hacking or, you know, shooting their laser beams, whatever, and they're not moving, you're going to be doing a lot more damage than if they were moving at their normal speeds. Just something to keep in mind. So let's just talk about this. Just like I said before, torpedoes are great against, and this also applies to bombs to some extent, so structures and deployables, battleships and battle cruisers, miners, haulers, transports, things that are relatively slow with relatively large signature radii. They're okay against, like I said, unaware explorers, like anyone who's just sitting there who doesn't know what's going on, because these are frigates. Even though torpedoes are typically bad against frigates, people don't typically combat fit or tank fit their exploration frigates or things like that. So they're not going to be sitting there running a damage control unit, you know, with like all these hardeners, or, you know, you're not going to have to worry about like reactive armor hardeners or anything like that on an exploration frigate for the most part. T1 cruisers, again, if they're sitting there, they're completely stationary, they're unaware of your presence or something, you could get the jump on them. By the time they realize what's going on, you may have gotten a couple of volleys in them, or bomb and torpedoes, so that's something to keep in mind. And larger drone boats, you know, hitting something like a Myrmidon or a Dominix is not out of the question, but you're not going to necessarily solo them in a bomber, depending, again, of course, on your skills, their fit, your fit, the element of surprise. Generally, going against drone boats is a very, very bad idea in a bomber because they have no way to deal with that incoming damage, and torpedoes are not going to get rid of drones in not nearly fast enough for you to make it out alive. You're going to be like Macaulay Culkin at the end of My Girl. You're just going to be swarmed to death. And let's see, bad against, of course, like I said before, combat frigates, combat destroyers, any cruisers that actually like have any kind of resist because they're motion or anything like this. And this is a very, very simplified profile that I'm showing you here, but it's just to keep in mind what kind of things you're generally going to be good against. Now, of course, if you're in a fleet, you're going out Inspector Fleet or Bomber's Bar, something like that. You've got 30 bombers, you could really take out a lot of stuff. You know, this may not necessarily apply. Maybe some, you know, speed fit confessor is not going to die to you, but of course more damage is always better. So, you might be thinking, which bomber is right for me? There's 4 stealth bombers, surely they're hugely different. And what I'm going to say right off the bat is, even though what you're going to see here in this graph, or what I'm going to say is the bombers are really not that different. They are, even these changes, you look here, the difference between them is very minor. You're looking at 5 to 10% differences between a lot of these things. So generally what I would say when choosing a bomber is, you know, choose a bomber based on what you can fit, okay, like what kind of fitting skills you have, because there are minor differences there, and of course what kind of frigates you would like to fly, because if you want to fly Caldari frigates in general, then just train for the Manticore, it's fine. You're not missing out by not going for the other ones as much. Now what I did with this chart is show some general, every major difference between the bombers, from what kind of slot layout and damage type they do, their scan resolution, their velocity, the CPU, power grid, and this is all base stats here, their capacitor, hit points, their align time. Actually, the hit points and align time are based on max skills there. The cargo space, signature radius, and the targeting range. And I also took the liberty to bold which 2 ships out of all the stealth bombers are best in each category. So you'll see, for instance, that the Hound and the Purifier are the fastest ships that have the smallest signature radius. So as far as SIG and speed tanking goes, the Purifier and the Hound are the best for that. You're also going to see that the Nemesis and the Manticore have the most CPU, and they also have the most cargo space. So if you want to carry alternate fits with you, you want to carry extra bombs, or you also see they have the largest targeting range. If you want to be in a part of a fleet composition where, you know, other ships stay close and tackle, but you stay out at like 100 kilometers and just bombard at long range, you know, I'm talking about obviously having, you know, additional skills trained past this, then these ships will have that kind of benefit. The Purifier overall is a very balanced ship. You'll see it has a lot of pluses, it has several minuses. It's got the 5-3-3 slot layouts, 5 high, 3 medium, 3 lows. It does electromagnetic damage. The Hound is the fastest ship. It has the small sig radius. It also has the worst capacitor, so it's not as balanced as the Purifier may be. It has the worst cargo space. It has the worst targeting range. So the Hound is really, if you want to do the fast, you know, orbit close, like I want to get in on people, I want to align faster, I want to, you know, get the hell out, you know, faster when things go wrong, then the Hound is for you. The Manticore is typically known for, I feel like I messed up actually. I flipped accidentally the CPU on these 2 ships. The Manticore should have the most CPU, so excuse me there. The Manticore has the most CPU, so it's generally considered to be easy to fit, although there's some caveats there too. And of course having long targeting range, and it's a sexy little crab. It's just it's a sexy looking ship. I don't know what else to say. It's a 5-4-2 slot layout. And the Nemesis, but you also see the Manticore, has a very poor scan resolution, so it's going to take you the longest time to lock a ship. And the Nemesis, of course, having a lot of capacitor, still having, even though I messed it up on the slide, a relatively high CPU. It has the lowest align time with good skills, and it has the max cargo space. So just some things to keep in mind. I personally loved my Nemesis. I think it looks very cool, and it's just an overall beautiful ship. There, I made it glow. And then here I just broke these ships into 2 broad categories, and this is what I think is the most important thing for choosing a stealth bomber. And this comes down to the differences I just said, but also the slot layout. So like I mentioned, the Purifier and the Hound are the fastest ships with the small sig radius. So in general, that means that it's more realistic that you can get into a ship. Like if you want to solo a more dangerous, like battle cruiser or something like that, and you want to get in tight next to them and try to set up some kind of tight orbit, that's more reasonable. I'm not saying you'll succeed. You got to try it, but it's more reasonable in Purifier Hound. But the Manticore and the Nemesis have the benefit of having better damage application. And that comes from the fact that they have more CPU and they have more mid slots. They have 4 mid slots compared to the 3 on the Purifier and the Hound. And what that means is they could, for instance, fit more target painters in the mid slot to make the target signature radius larger. They can more easily fit rigs like the rigger catalyst, which will decrease your missile's explosion radius, which again will help you apply more torpedo damage. So because they have more CPU and they have more mid slots, you can apply damage easier. And I guess what I'm saying is the Purifier and Hound, it's harder for the enemy to apply damage to you. Let's also talk about the damage types. Because the Purifier has EM, the Hound has explosive, so the thermal and concussive on the Manticore and Nemesis. Because it depends how your target is fit, there's certain holes and resists, and for Purifier and Hound it's going to come down a lot more towards, are they armor tanked, are they shield tanked, whereas the Manticore and Nemesis, that's not going to come up as much. So just something to keep in mind. And a lot of times you're not going to be able to control that, but if you're planning a fleet against known targets, this is something you want to keep in mind. Here, because of the slot layout, again, because the Manticore and the Hound have a 3rd low slot, right? What that means is that they have they have more playroom there, and it means that it's easier for you to fit something to boost your power grid in your low slot, and then fit a medium shield extender, which is very common for these ships, and combine that with the increased speed. They can tank longer. You could throw a damage control unit. You could throw another ballistic control unit in the 3rd. Low slot at the bottom. So those are all things to keep in mind. You could even throw in a coprocessor to help make up for the fact that they have less CPU, but then of course you don't really have as many things to spend the CPU on because you don't have an extra mid slot for more electronic warfare. And that's why we see here in the Manticore Nemesis, because they have 4 mid slots, you have more options. So for instance, one thing I commonly do on Nemesis or Manticore is fit 1 warp disruptor and 1 warp scrambler, and a propulsion mod and a target painter. And what that means is I can apply my damage better with the target painter. I can have the prop mod to keep up with things or get in position, make bookmarks, whatever. But then I also have 3 points to prevent someone from warping off, which is great against, people who have their epithals to go fly around, or for, explorers are very commonly very heavily stabbed. And that also means that you can carry around lots of mid-slot options with you with a mobile depot and swap them out as you need. So you can carry, for instance, on a Manticore Nemesis, you could throw on a sensor booster so you can catch pods easier, or catch small, fast ships easier to lock them faster. So you have more options with the mid slots, whereas Purifier and Hound, you have more damage mitigation options, or more raw damage options, in the sense of having more ballistic controls. And then finally down here, like I said, the Purifier and Hound, because of everything I said here, signature and speed tanking, option to have medium shield extenders, damage control, anything like that, and because you can kind of hit the holes in someone's tank easier, depending on if you chose your ship correctly, you're more likely to solo a combat-ready ship. This is very broadly speaking. Of course, you are very likely to fail miserably, as I have many times. Because the Manticore and Nemesis have more damage application, and they have longer targeting range, and they have more, they have more capacitor or whatever. Well, the Nemesis does at least. You can, run EWAR longer, run more EWAR, apply your damage better. You can have that support, and also because they're slower, you're not as agile. You can't get out as easily, so it's safer to be applying damage from a longer range. So that's pretty much it as far as stealth bombers. My quick overview here goes. I'm certainly available for any questions. I know I went through a lot in a row there, and I just found this very pretty image right before we went live here, and I really like it. So any questions, please let me know.
A question on ganking explorers. I'm using exploration to fund my stealth bomber setup. Will T2 drones make you hesitate in attacking me while I'm hacking a site?
If you have the T2 drones already out, then I would be very hesitant to attack you. That's, even though lots of ships can have T2 drones, and there could be an Imicus with T2 drones or anything like that, like, just knowing in general that you're already thinking about that and you already have the drones ready to lock me and to send them my way will definitely, and of course it depends what you're flying. If you are in a ship that I really believe I can one-shot you, it may, then what will probably happen is I'll just, approach you from a longer distance and align to some celestial ahead of time in case you throw the drones on me, and just hope that I can apply the one-shot or two-shot damage to take you out. But yes, it will definitely give me a second thought on it.
Typically in a Astero.
Yeah, so if it's here's the thing with Asteros, right? So Asteros are definitely like the most dangerous, exploration ship to generally engage. I have definitely killed Asteros in stealth bombers. A lot of people in my corp have. It all comes down to element of surprise. So the thing to keep in mind with Asteros is I'm more concerned about them being slippery. The fact that they have 4 lows, plenty of room for warp stabs and nanos. The fact that they're so freaking fast means that if I don't have 100% element of surprise on them, then even if they don't kill me, I'm pretty sure they're going to get away. But if I think they're combat fit in any way, and I'll definitely go through people's kill boards to see if they've ever used an Astero to kill someone before, and if so, then I'll be a little bit more wary. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, because you only live as many times as you got clones, but you got to be careful.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
What's your favorite target when you're soloing?
My favorite target, my personal favorite target is a salvaging Noctis, and the reason is because the salvaging Noctis is like a fruit, right? And it's this fruit that has been planted and ripened. Like someone has cleared a whole, anomaly or some site. They've spent all this time bringing out their fancy ships to fight all sleepers or other ships. They put all this time and effort into it. Maybe they spent 30 minutes doing this, and then they're like, yeah, I did such a good job. And then they warp back, and then they come back to their Noctis, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to get so much money. This is so much loot. And they're tractor beaming, and they're salvaging. And they're like, yeah, oh my God, this is great. And they're getting ready to align. And then right when the last wreck is getting salvaged, that's when I uncloak and torpedo them in like 3 volleys. And so there's just something so inherently satisfying about knowing that the emotional time, fiscal, and resource investment by that person has been 100% destroyed in about a 10-second window. That is just absolutely lovely. Whereas, you blow up someone's like exploration frigate or whatever, like it costs them 400,000 ISK. They probably, they may or may not care, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, so you like crushing hopes and dreams.
I consider it's not about crushing hopes and dreams. I believe that the stealth bombers and other covert ops craft play a special role in Eve, and that is the role of teaching people that they are not entitled to their loot. So
I'm all on board with that.
Right, like if you go into spooky space and you are solo and you don't have any, there's so many Noctises I've seen where they are destroyed and then they didn't even have drones fit. Like, why you have a drone bay, you didn't even have drones fit? You didn't even have, either light drones to fight off someone like me or to fight off just some small interceptor or something that tackles you. You didn't have salvage drones to salvage things faster so you could get off the field faster. It's just irresponsible, and that person deserves their free torpedoes.
It's a public service.
Exactly. And if you fire the bomb, then even if they don't die, all the wrecks die, so there's always that. Any other questions?
Would it be generally good to start off doing bombing in nullsec to kind of get practice before wormholes, or is it pretty much just jump right into wormholes?
Well, all right. So let me. And are you generally talking about solo or what?
Mostly solo, yeah.
Okay, so for solo, every area of space has its pros and cons, right? So, low sec. To start, honestly, I would actually say starting in low sec might be your best bet if you really want to just start from scratch, because low sec you have more traffic because there's more people. You can kind of take your time. You can be generally safer and not know that you would know if there's some giant group of people waiting to kill you. So you can find a slow system where there's places that you can camp, but you don't have to worry about like, oh, is someone going to just drop some huge fleet on me any second? And if you see them show up, then you just sit cloaked and wait. But of course the downside of low sec is your security status. And the fact that other people can see you sitting in local. So once you start building up a reputation for killing people in stealth bombers, if you have a kill board or something, it's more likely someone would know that. Nullsec, of course, you have the option to use bombs. You have there's no gate guns, so you could camp gates. You could set up drag bubbles and wait for people to drag bubbles. That's great. The main downside of Nullsec, of course, is depending where you are, it's way more quiet. There's way fewer people, so you're going to be waiting way longer than Lowsec. And the other problem is that most of Nullsec is part of big alliances that have intel channels and things like that, so you're not going to be catching people by surprise as much. If you go deep into, if you're in the middle of Geminate and you're in people's space and you're on their intel channels, and someone's going to know you're in a stealth bomber sitting there. And if their local people come in, they're not going to be dumb enough to run some site, while you're sitting in system. Whereas if you're sitting in Lowsec, people might just think you're in a station or whatever. And then wormhole space, of course, which is great because, a lot of what makes stealth bomber strong is the element of surprise, right? Wormhole space has the ultimate element of surprise, and people won't even know you're in system unless they specifically had someone watching the wormhole you came through, or they specifically, saw you on G-scan during the 1 second where you went from, your gate cloak, your wormhole cloak, so to speak, into your normal cloak. The downsides, of course, being that wormhole space is very empty, even, compared to a lot of other areas of space. You'll have to get good at navigating wormhole space and finding places that are being frequented. And of course, the fact that you don't know who's there in the system with you. So, I just posted a video where I was waiting to kill a miner, about to uncloak, and another nemesis uncloaks before me. And I was like, oh god, it's a good thing I didn't uncloak. And then the miner guy has a fleet warp in on him to protect him. And then the nemesis guy has a fleet to warp in to protect him. And then I uncloak to shoot all those people. So at various stages in that, no one knew who the other people were or who was there. So it's always important to keep that in mind in wormhole space.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
We have another question getting asked in the chat. Graham Durand is asking, what is the minimum viable fleet size if you're not wanting to solo bomb?
What is the minimum viable fleet size of bombers if you don't want to solo? I mean, again, that's very hard to answer. It greatly depends 100% on what you're aiming to do. So if you're trying to do some kind of roam or something like that, if you're trying to do black ops, you're going to need again, it's really hard to say. I would feel like you want to be up in the 10, 20, whatever level area, because you need to be ready to hit anything. Like if a small combat frigate comes through and engages you guys or decloaks someone, or just points someone, you're going to need enough damage to actually get that thing off the field, or it's just going to wreck absolutely everyone like in billiards. It's just going to bounce between you guys and just absolutely wreck everyone. If you're going to wormholes, if you're camping places, if you're camping somewhere, I would say there is no minimum size, because like I said before, you get to choose what you engage. If you have 3 guys sitting on a gate in nullsec, or you set up a drag bubble in nullsec somewhere and you're cloaked, there's no minimum size, because if something lands in your drag bubble that you can't take on, you just let it go. You just let it go and they'll move on. So it really 100% depends on where you plan to be, if you're roaming versus jumping versus camping, and what kind of tools are available to you and who is in that general area.
Okay, another one. Terra Milana asks, why did you get into bombers?
Why did I get into bombers? There's 2 reasons why. So the first reason is that I started off the game doing exploration. I was always interested in exploration. I had read a lot about EVE, and people said that they got bored if they just stayed in high sec and things like that. So very early on, I just decided to get into exploration, go out deep into nullsec and go through wormholes and things like that. And obviously, if you're already training, exploration, you're working on astrometrics and navigation and cloaking. You're thinking about, should I train into a Tech 2 exploration ship? And once you start doing that, stealth bombers are a natural consideration to think about. The other main reason why I actually went into stealth bombers is because of Chesser, who, if you guys don't know who he is a veteran EVE player. He's very big into solo and small gang PvP, and he has a blog that everyone who's interested in stealth bombers should read. It's called Confessions of a Stealth Bomber Killer. He wrote it a couple years ago, so it was after. It's basically still in the modern age of bombers, of torpedoes and bombs and cov-ops, the way stealth bombers work now. There's been very minor changes since then. But he had this blog that told all these very interesting stories about how he would camp wormholes for weeks at a time in his stealth bomber, and it just really inspired me to consider that approach, and he just had really interesting stories, and I just thought, that it also just seemed approachable, because the way he wrote about it showed me I didn't need to play EVE 24 hours a day to do something important. I could sit and do other things, sit in my bomber, camp places, and wait for things to happen, and then start putting my plan in motion from there. So it seemed also like a lower commitment thing, which drew me in early in EVE when I didn't know that I would still be playing this game a year from now.
I've got a question. Is you're just planning on going for frigates and in exploration sites, are rockets viable for a stealth?
Rockets are definitely viable. Rockets have a lot. If you were definitely 100% only planning to go after exploration frigates, then generally speaking, rockets are going to be better. And of course that depends, again, on your fit, your skills, your implants, things like that. The reason that I don't like rocket fit is a couple of reasons. So one is that, just basically what I'm saying is that the second you choose rocket fit, you cut out every other potential target. Like, if you want to go destroy someone's like mobile tracked air unit in rockets, like it's just going to be painful. Like it's going to be a painfully long time. If you're in nullsec and you come across a medium warp disruption bubble of someone else's and you want to destroy it, like it's not going to happen. You're gonna die of old. The heat death of the universe will happen first, or you're gonna get bored. You're gonna run out of plex for your account before you destroy that thing. If you see someone running PI in an epithal, if someone goes by in an Iteron, you see someone mining in the system, like you basically are not going to have the options to engage those things. So I would say with torpedoes, I've generally had like a 90% success rate engaging explorers, maybe like 85%. If it was rockets, maybe I would have a 90 to 95% success rate with that. So to me, is increasing that success rate for one specific type of ship by 5%, is it worth it? Compared to having the open engagement profile, because bombers already have a very narrow engagement profile, and to narrow it even more for a very slight increase in performance against one ship type, to me, has never been palatable.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and just one quick note too, if you want to go through my corpse kill board, WINGSPAN Delivery Services, you'll see that, using, because we had this debate many times in Corp, but pretty much no one in my corp still uses lots of rockets. We've all pretty much switched over to torpedoes all the time, and there's hundreds of T1 Explorer and T1 and T2 and Astero kills with torpedoes, so it's definitely completely viable.
We have another question from Terra Milana. Do you fly any other combat ships besides stealth bombers? He's particularly interested in your other PvP ships.
Sure. So because of what I do and my corporation does, and we have a general corp charter of covert operations, I fly covop ships, covops capable ships. So while I have flown non-covop ships for very short periods of time in the past, generally the ships I fly are all the stealth bombers, which I can now fly.
Enter channel.
I fly the Astero and Stratios, although the Stratios generally has a larger engagement profile than the Astero, so I prefer it. But of course, when you lose one, it's a lot more painful, and navigating around is harder, especially also in wormhole space. Now that there are frigate-only wormholes, taking out Stratios sometimes a bummer when you show up somewhere and then you can't get through that hole. As much as you try, maybe you could just get the tip, but not the rest. That wormhole is going to be closed off to you. And I can fly some recons, however my recon skills are not so great right now. So what I'm actually currently training into the Amara recons. After that I'll be training into the Caldari and Minmatar recons. But recons are, they're not the kind of ships that you typically fly around solo. I would say if you're going to fly any around solo, then the Amara ones are the best for that. But, Arazus, and all the rest of them, you are typically more geared towards fleet support, at least where I operate. I could definitely see in low sec, having the non-direct D-scan thing is a huge bonus and things like that. But where I operate in wormhole space primarily and in some null sec, then Stratios, Astero, Bomber are what I typically fly. All right, is there anything else? I assume there's nothing else, but certainly I don't want to scare anyone away if anyone has any questions. All right then. So, once again, I am Chance Ravinne from WINGSPAN Delivery Services. I was very happy to meet with you guys today and give this presentation. If you think of anything later, any other questions that you didn't think of, feel free to shoot them to me on email. I run the website torpedodelivery.com, where you can find other information about stealth bombers and the kind of things that my corporation does. So if you just want to generally look into that and get more information or learn more, you can find resources there. And of course, there's other great Eve Uni classes to learn about the exact missile dynamics and alignment dynamics and wormhole dynamics if you want to learn about those things. So thank you, everyone, for having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's class. Thank you.